პროდუქტიულობა. საშუალო გამოშვება წარმოებული ერთი მომუშავის მიერ დროის კონკრეტულ მონაკვეთში. როგორც წესი, იზომება როგორც 1 საათში გამოშვებული პროდუქციის რაოდენობა.
The checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma. Matthew Miller, the U.S. State Department spokesperson, stated on November 30th that U.S. suspended the strategic partnership with Georgia. The decision comes after the ruling judici's decision to unilaterally suspend EU accession negotiations. Miller writes, U.S. with EU regrets Georgian Dream's decision to suspend EU accession. We condemn excessive force used against Georgians, rightfully protesting this betrayal of their constitution. EU is a bulwark against Kremlin. Prime Minister Kobakhidzé announced the ruling Georgian Dreams Party's decision to reject the accession negotiations with the EU until 2028 and to refuse all budget support from the EU during a briefing on November 28th. According to Kobakhidzé, EU-Georgian relations should be reciprocal, and as a proud and self-respecting nation, Georgians categorically would not want to see EU integration as charity. EU integration process for Georgia has already been frozen by Brussels due to the Russian law and Georgian Dream's government lack of commitment to the reforms essential for the accession. Kobakhidze's statement comes after the resolution of the EU Parliament to sanction Georgian Dream high officials and statements from a German ambassador to Georgia, Peter Fischer, aired on BMG yesterday day earlier. PM's statement was followed by demonstrations on Tbilisi's main Rustaveli Avenue. On November 29th, the PM stated that if the EU opens accession negotiation itself, Georgian Dream will have nothing against them and phrase the decision. On Thursday, the European Parliament adopted a resolution condemning the 26th October parliamentary elections in Georgia, an EU candidate country, for being neither free nor fair, representing yet another manifestation of the continued democratic backsliding of the country, for which the ruling Georgian Dream Party is fully responsible. For the vote, results announced by the country's Central Election Commission do not serve as a reliable representation of the will of the Georgian people. They add, Parliament rejects any recognition of the parliamentary elections as a result, as the international community should too. And MAPS want the elections rerun within a year under thorough international supervision and by an independent election administration. Parliament wants the EU and its member states to impose personal sanctions on the officials and political leaders in Georgia who are responsible for democratic backsliding, violations of electoral laws and standards, and the misuse of the state institutions. This concludes Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze, Mayor of Tbilisi and Secretary General of the ruling Georgian Dream Party, Kaxakaladze, Speaker of the Georgian Parliament, Shalva Papuashvili, and former Prime Minister and oligarch Bidzina Ivanishvili. MAPS also call on the EU to severely restrict formal EU-level contact with the Georgian government and parliament, while stating clearly that Georgia, as a result of recently adopted anti-democratic legislation, including the law on transparency and foreign influence, has already had its EU integration process effectively suspended. Georgia's ambassadors to Bulgaria, Netherlands and Lithuania have resigned. The same is true for the acting ambassador in Italy. The ambassadors of Georgia in South Korea and the Czech Republic said that they are really committed to the continuous process of European integration. The number of officials of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who say that the government statement on removing Georgia from the agenda of EU's accession negotiations until 2028 does not correspond to the country's strategic interest exceeds 210. In response to the Georgian dream, the big businesses of Georgia make statements supporting the irreversible process of European integration and condemn the violence against the citizens. Statements started to spread actively on Saturday, and the process still continues. This was preceded by the statement of 13 business associations in Georgia responding to the decision of the Georgian Dream to suspend the negotiations with the application for joining the EU. Business associations categorically disagree with the ruling party's decision. The joint statement was signed by the Georgia EU Business Association, ICC Georgia, EBA Georgia, Georgian Manufacturers Association, Taxpayers Union of Georgia, Hotel and Restaurant Federation, Georgian Tourism Industry Alliance, German Business Association, US Chamber of Commerce, Georgian Farmers Association, Georgian Distributors Business Association, Restaurateurs Association, and ICDC. Basically everyone except the Georgian Business Association, and if the BAG releases a statement finally, it would probably be better for them to use it for internal consumption. In the meantime, the lari has reportedly experienced a sharp depreciation, and it is highly likely that this depreciation will continue throughout the current week. The lari has devalued by 4.10 tetri against the dollar and much more significantly by 8 tetri against the euro, whose value has reached 2.93 Georgian lari. The National Bank of Georgia has restricted those with income in the national currency to take out foreign currency loans up to $500,000 Georgian lari. According to the MBG, this change is aimed at reducing the dollarization of bank loans. The National Bank of Georgia has increased the minimum reserve requirements for the foreign currency deposits by 5% for commercial banks. This decision aims to prevent the increased foreign currency liquidity in banks from turning into excessive foreign currency lending. In October, households and businesses transferred 1 billion lari of deposits into dollars, according to statistics published by the National Bank of Georgia. According to the report, the larization coefficient of deposits decreased by 2% from 51 in September to 49% by the end of October. Commercial banks operating in Georgia generated a net profit of 2.6 billion Georgian lari during the first 10 months of 2024, which is 304 million GEL or 13% more than in the same period of the previous year. More than 250 employees of the National Bank have joined a statement deeming the removal of the EU accession negotiations from the agenda for 4 years as inconsistent with Article 78 of the Constitution. A similar statement is also supported by nearly 200 employees of the Tbilisi City Hall. Over 50 employees of the Ministry of the Defense have also joined the statement with identical content.
This is the Checkpoints. I'm Elena Kwanchilashvili, author and the host of the show, and the Checkpoints team is ready to sum up business and economics week for you. November 28 was a dramatic day in Georgia's recent history for all those cheering Georgia on its path towards Euro-Atlantic integration. This is the day when the Prime Minister Kobakhidzé announced openly the ruling Georgian Dream Party's decision to abort the efforts to start the accession negotiations with the EU until 2028. He also said the cabinet would refuse all EU budget support. The Prime Minister took the official party line that while EU membership partnership remain the priority for 2030, this would happen only in Georgia's terms of maintaining dignity. Putin praised the Georgian government. When the event started in Georgia, I, to tell the truth, watched all this with surprise and followed it. We have no relations with them, with the Georgian government, but I was simply amazed at their courage and character to stand up for themselves. This statement belongs to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin refers to the Georgia's government's this decision to abort EU accession talks. Putin said he was surprised by the courage with which the Georgian government defended the law on transparency of foreign influences, the same as Russian law. According to Putin, he was watching the events in Georgia with surprise. Here is a short timeline to how the Georgian dream led up to announcing the decision that day and what followed. The European Parliament adopted a resolution on Georgia's worsening democratic crisis following the recent parliamentary elections and alleged electoral fraud, which slams the ruling Georgian dream for the authoritarian shift, condemning the democratic backsliding in Georgia, including as a result of the allegedly rigged elections. The resolution also called on the Georgian government to hold new, free and fair elections within 1 year. With the exclusive participation of the ruling Georgian Dream Party members, the Georgian parliament approved the government's program entitled Only with Peace, Dignity, Prosperity to Europe. The government program states that Georgia will continue its Euro-Atlantic foreign policy, also aiming to reset relations with the US. Following the approval of the government's program, the Ram Parliament, which currently seats only the Georgian Dream members of parliament, gave Kobakhize's proposed cabinet a vote of confidence with 84 votes in favor and none against. No questions were asked from the floor. President of Georgia, Salome Zurabishvili, held an emergency meeting with the representatives of the diplomatic corps. The presidential administration reported the president summoned the extraordinary meeting after the Prime Minister of Georgia, Kobakhidzé, stated that Georgia aborted the accession talks with the EU till 2028. The government also refused any budget grant from the EU until the end of 2028. The process had already been frozen by Brussels due to the Russian law and GD government's lack of commitment to the reforms. President Salome Zurabishvili made a statement after meeting with the diplomatic corps and opposition representatives, saying that the Georgian Dream's decision to abort the EU accession process has finalized the constitutional coup after the rigged October 26 parliamentary elections. She called on the EU to take all necessary decisions and support the holding of new elections in Georgia. President also called on the opposition to unite and urged Georgian ambassadors, civil servants, police and the army to stand by Georgian people today. After making a statement, the president joined the demonstrators gathered near the parliament. Dozens of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs employees have issued a joint statement in connection with Prime Minister Kobakhize's announcement to stop EU accession. They expressed their commitment to Georgia's EU aspirations, stressed that the enlargement window that is now open may never be reopened, and if Georgia stops on this path, it risks facing isolation. At around 8:30 p.m. on November 28, parallel rallies around Georgia picked up. Locals started to gather in various regions of Georgia. There were rallies in Zugdidi, Kutaisi and Batumi. People in Tbilisi gathered in 3 places in front of the parliament, Georgian Dream headquarters and the presidential administration. Later, the rally combined in front of the parliament. Later, after the first cannons had been fired by the special forces, President Salome Zurabishvili joined the peaceful demonstrators in front of the parliament. After joining the rally, the president went directly to the representatives of the special forces and tried to talk to them. She asked them, "Don't you talk to your president?" and urged them to think about their country, their children and their future. The riot police stationed near the parliament on Chichinadze Street began spraying tear gas and pepper spray at around 1 a.m. Several people were injured and required medical attention as they were sprayed in the eyes. About 1 hour later, the brutal dispersal started on Rustaveli Avenue. Unidentified people in black overalls, helmets and gas masks were operating in front of the riot police line, chasing and beating peaceful protesters. Meanwhile, while the water cannons were blasting the water mixed with unidentified substances. The new water cannons that the Minister of Interior boasted about recently that were much more powerful than the ones Mia had previously used. During the whole protest period, Mia issued several statements. Their final judgment is that the peaceful protest exceeded the norms established by the law on assembly and demonstration. The watchdog Young Georgian Lawyers Association said in its statement that the protests on Rustaveli Avenue are being dispersed with the usual unlawful and disproportionate use of force. There is evidence of violations of the norms for the use of active special means, including the targeted use of pepper spray in the face and the mixing of two special means, a water cannon and a chemical irritant. An important part of that picture yesterday was also the fact that GD officials attacked the German ambassador to Georgia, Peter Fischer. Georgian Dream Deputy Irakli Zarkua was the first one to appeal to the Minister of Foreign Affairs to start the procedure of recalling German ambassador to Georgia, Peter Fischer, from the country. The reason was this interview aired on BMG TV on November 27.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for hosting us today and for the interview. Germany has been supporting Georgia's EU integration process and social-economic development for years. Our diplomatic relationships were launched in 1992, and since then Germany has been a good friend and a partner for Georgia. What would you say where Georgia's EU integration process stands now?
So it's my pleasure to join you, and it's exactly right. We have been a very good friend and partner to Georgia for 30 years, more than 30 years, and we are at an impasse now. We are at a crisis of our relations, because around the change of the year 2023-2024, the Georgian government has decided that we are no longer a good friend and partner. So we just judge things by the facts. And our partnership has been based on Georgia's ambition for Euro-Atlantic integration, which, as far as we can tell, the Georgian people have always told us we want to be a democracy, we want to be a market economy, we want to do Euro-Atlantic integration, we would like to join the EU, we would like to join NATO, we even put it in our constitution. And that's the basis for our partnership. However, the facts created by the Georgian government speak against that course, because if you want to join the EU, you have to adopt EU legislation. It's very simple. To join the EU means European Union legislation is the law of the land in the new member. When that happens, you're a member. As long as that does not happen, you cannot be a member, because that's the essence of the EU, that we share the same legislation in all EU member states. And we even made the greatest act of partnership and friendship, and if you like, I like to say, a sign of love and affection. We offered Georgia candidate status to our union. That's the core of our societal and political existence, the European Union. We said, you can join us. And we made that offer on an advance of trust, because the conditions to join the EU are very clear. They're all written down, by the way. You can read them. Nobody here bothers to read them, but I just recommend, if you care about it, read. Now, we said there are 9 points that Georgia should fulfill to get candidate status. And Georgia said, yes, we will work very hard. We will fulfill the 9 points. Georgia did not fulfill the 9 points, none of them. And then we gave it anyway. We said, we give you candidate status in the understanding that you will. We trust you that you will. And last December, I think it was the 15th of December, I stood with all the EU ambassadors and the entire Georgian government and the chairman of the Georgian Dream political party on a stage on Freedom Square in front of 100,000 people, and we all celebrated candidate status. And right afterwards, the mood turned. The Georgian government reintroduced the law, the so-called law on transparency of foreign influence, which is against the fundamentals of the EU. It's not just not in compliance, it's in gross contradiction to everything the EU stands for. Because at the foundation of the EU is democracy and rule of law institutions. And this law is completely incompatible. Everyone knows the reasons. Expertises have been handed to the Georgian government on behalf of the EU. It passed another law on LGBTQ, which is also not compatible with EU membership. And it changed its rhetoric. Germany is no longer addressed as a friend and as a partner. We're thrown in to a crazy notion of a global war party. We're accused of promoting liberal fascism, whatever that's supposed to be, because liberal is freedom and many ideas exist side by side. That's Germany, that's the European Union. Fascism is only one idea is good and all the others are inferior. So it doesn't fit together. We're accused of supporting revolution here. Yeah, we're foreign agents. We're no longer friends and partners. In the terminology of the Georgian government, we're being called foreign agents. And we're accused of trying to draw Georgia into the Ukraine war. All of that is completely untrue. We completely reject it. And this was the answer of the Georgian government to our act of friendship and partnership to offering the candidate status. So the answer to the question is where we stand at an impasse. We stand at a crisis moment. And the future of Georgia in the EU is highly in question right now. Also, in June and again in October, the leaders of the European Union decided and wrote down in their decision that the accession process has come to a halt. It's also written down. Nobody here bothers to read it, but I recommend to read it. The government is telling you, no, nothing is halted. We decide what's halted and what's not halted. The candidate doesn't decide. So it's halted. And if you ask me, I don't see it coming back on track in the near future. I don't see any positive signs of that at all. The rhetoric continues. The legislation is adopted. Georgia is moving away from the European Union instead of closer. Plus, the way the election was conducted is not compatible to what we expect from a candidate country. If you ask anyone in Germany, most anyone, because we have a high diversity of opinions, of course, but the great majority of people will tell you that if they look at the Georgians' elections, they will say, we don't want that in Europe. And the trend is going away from Georgia. So it's a crisis, and I think there's a high risk that maybe you missed your opportunity.
What does this crisis mean for the business sector? So this rubric is run within the Business Morning Show, and we are addressing business. What this crisis right now means for the companies that want to be present on the EU market. We have signed the EU-Georgia Association Agreement, DCFTA is part of it, and the Georgian companies has been using this opportunity to get their services and products on the EU market. This crisis where we are right now, what does it mean for the companies?
Well, it means you will continue doing business as you have been doing, and with very low integration with the European market. And you will miss the giant opportunity to become a member, a full-fledged member of the single European Union market, which is one of the top 3 markets in the world. And there's different ways to evaluate, but I kind of tend to say perhaps the US is a little bit too free, not enough environmental protection, not enough social protection, and China is a little bit too controlled, so the EU is a pretty good market. We have a very high level of prosperity in the EU, and if this crisis remains unresolved and the trend continues as it has been, then you won't join the EU and you won't join the single market. And you know, Georgia has not made very much progress in integrating it to the EU market. I think since the coming into effect of the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement in 2016, you've only increased your exports, so Georgian goods going to the EU market, by 2%, something like that. So minimal. Because, maybe this will bring us to the technical part of our interview, we have standards in the EU. And to meet them, to import into our market, you have to meet those standards. For Georgia, because it's mainly agricultural products, it's the phytosanitary standards. So you can't just send any milk or any fruit or any nut or any jam to the EU. It has to meet a certain high standard because we have also a high standard of consumer protection. And so far, Georgian companies have not fulfilled those standards to any noticeable degree.
Before we dive into the standards and also whether the Georgian businesses are compatible with the sustainability standards as well that are required at the EU market, my question would be, considering the crisis that we are now in terms of the EU integration process, what do you think the role of the business sector can be? How they can help the Georgian people to become part of the EU?
I mean, so business sector is always very important. That's where we generate our jobs, our income, our wealth, our prosperity. I notice that in Georgia we speak a lot about politics and political machinations and people and who's for Russia and who's not for Russia, instead of talking about what matters more to people's everyday life. Why do we have politics? So people can have a good life. And for good life, people need to have a reasonable income, a roof over their head, enough food, money for their health, money to educate their children, and so on, right? So personally, I would think that joining the EU is the best thing that can happen to the Georgian economy and to the business sector. You won't join the US, you won't join the North American Free Trade Agreement. I doubt you will join the Chinese economy. So it's really the only alternative that's available, rather than staying where you are, in the South Caucasus, sort of, you know, with the neighbors that you have, with good relationship with Turkey and all that, sort of staying in place. And the EU, business people trade and invest mainly with themselves, amongst themselves. Why? Because we have a framework, a legal and business framework that people know, that they feel familiar with, and that is also safe. Of course, some people say there's too much regulation, the tax should be higher or lower, but generally it's a pretty good. That's why we invest mainly amongst ourselves. So as Georgia was getting closer to the EU, European businessmen would look at Georgia and would say, aha, I see they're advancing towards us. I think maybe I should study opportunities there, because I expect that they will have a doing business framework with everything that belongs to it, which is good, which I like to invest in. It's a fact, and I've heard many such stories, that as Georgia has put a full brake on its European accession, a lot of business people are reconsidering, and I know accounts of business people who have said, well, maybe not. I'll wait. I even know accounts of people who said, I made an investment. It's not a big investment, but I'm going to wind it down. So the question is the Georgian economy an economy that's moving towards the EU, which is a certain established, large, prosperous, functioning framework, or does Georgia remain kind of an emerging market in the Southern Caucasus for whatever that's worth? I mean, that's a choice that Georgia can make. So if I were a Georgian business person, I would try to tell my government which choice I prefer.
If we specifically look at the relations of the Georgian companies with the German companies and investments coming in from Germany and from Georgia to Germany, the products and services, how do you assess this and what is the trend? Is it increasing, decreasing? Where do we stand?
So I don't know the most current numbers. I would guess that it's decreasing, and my projection is that it will decrease if Georgia moves further away from the EU. It's just not very interesting to German investors. It's a small market, not integrated into any other big market. I mean, Georgia is the size of our big cities, right? Right now, even the investment is not significant. We have a couple of companies that are invested here with not very large sums and not very high value-added activity. And even a company like Heidelberg Cement withdrew from the Georgian market. It was one of our biggest investments. It sold its shares. So the trend is not good. I'm sorry to be a little bit negative, but it's important to talk about it. I noticed that in Georgia the discussion is, oh, we have such great growth rates, growing faster than all those lousy Europeans. Those Germans don't even have any growth. We Georgians have 10% growth. It's a windfall from the Russian attack on Ukraine. Windfalls don't last. And I see a lot of structural problems. I see a challenge to the value of the lari. I see fluctuations in the stock market prices of your companies that are listed on foreign stock exchanges. I think a relatively high proportion of your government debt is in concessional loans. The further you move away from the EU, the less concessional loans we will give you. It's a law of nature. So you'll have to refinance that by yourselves. The risk premium of your own government bonds over benchmark bonds like EU or US bonds will rise, has risen and will continue to rise. And I see a big problem for the Georgian economy, where I don't see how Georgia intends to solve it, is the immigration of the young people. Already since 2018 or 2019, I think so many young people left Georgia, mainly for the EU, by the way, that it makes about 3% of your population have left as young people. And now I hear many young people telling me that if the decision is that Georgia will move further away from the EU and stay here as a country in the Southern Caucasus and not follow anymore this Euro-Atlantic integration, then I will leave. I hear many.
It's a very difficult situation that we are right now, and from this conversation it's a bit hard to move towards sustainability topic, but the UN Global Compact in Georgia promotes sustainability within the business sector, and sustainability is a core for the EU as well. All the regulations that we're talking about in terms of the climate mitigation, in terms of the social sustainability, governance issues, those are enshrined in the EU directives that apply to the businesses, and businesses need to comply with them to be present on the EU market. you are supporting Georgia's economic development as well, the German government. How would you say whether the businesses in Georgia are aligning with those standards or should align more with those, or what is the requirements that the EU have in terms of sustainability in order to be present?
So just to make the transition, the only reason I'm being honest and that I can't paint a very rosy picture is because Germany still considers itself a friend of Georgia. And friends speak to each other honestly. We don't support each other's illusions and fantasies. It's my job to say what the German government thinks and what the EU thinks. So that's why I'm being very frank with you.
And thank you so much for that.
I don't want to discourage anyone, but I'm a little bit discouraged myself, honestly. Now, let's look at sustainability. The whole world is on an unsustainable path, right? Just to be a little bit more dark. We're using our natural resources faster than they can replenish. We're in a climate crisis. I think that's a fact. Unfortunately, some governments elect leaders that say the climate crisis is not real and we should just continue using more oil and gas. But 99% of all scientists tell us, and we can see with our eyes, that the climate crisis is real. Just look at the news. Every week you have a weather catastrophe somewhere. I know very well the distinction between weather and climate, but more frequent and more intense weather catastrophes are a result of climate change. And I think Georgia is also very behind on all that. So we need to advance much faster on sustainability and the laws and regulations all around that, circular economy, green economy, energy efficiency, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, if we want to save this planet. It's as easy as that. And, well, look at the fleet of cars that's driving around Georgia. I think they're very far away from EU regulations. In fact, most of them are crashed old cars that come from the EU and other countries that are here because they don't meet any more regulations in our countries. So we have finance programs, 2 big programs. Shall I tell you their names?
That would be good.
We have 2 big programs. One is the Green Growth Fund, GGF, and the European Fund for Southeast Europe. And Germany, those are financing programs, the concessional finance that I gave. It's very cheap money. You can't go to a normal bank and get that. You get that if you're a state that is aspiring to EU membership. You get a lot of that. And the volume right now is about 300 million. And so Georgian companies can take loans for upgrading their technologies, reducing their energy consumptions, lowering their carbon emissions, getting building and technical assistance, and that kind of thing. So we have a big program going, but I think Georgia has a long way to go. And now, the closer you get to Europe, the more intense the partnership becomes. So if Georgia were at some point to open negotiations, then more programs kick in. We call them pre-accession funds, because we're negotiating with you to join the European Union because we want you to join. So we will help you to join. And all those programs will multiply. We say more for more. But the further you move away from the EU, then the basis of our relationship has changed and you become just another country out there like many other countries, let's say Azerbaijan or Armenia or Central Asian countries, and then it's less for less. Georgia has been enjoying a privileged relationship with the EU because you had such a hard time, because you said Euro-Atlantic integration, because you made so much progress on it, because you're such nice people, because we have a connection, right? But if you say that connection doesn't matter to us, we're not interested anymore in the EU, and that's what the signals are saying to us right now, then we will reduce you to a normal country. And like Uzbekistan, maybe.
How we can get back to the path of the EU integration, and what would be your, as we near to the end of our interview, what would be your recommendation to the stakeholders? Of course, the government, but also the business sector. What we can do more in order to get back to the path of the integration?
So, I mean, if the people want to join the EU, they have to tell the government, we are the people we would like to join the EU. You know, the elections are very controversial, very contested. What we can say is that there were irregularities in so many areas that it doesn't pass the standard for an EU candidate. If in an EU member state there were elections with so many irregularities, we would all say, what is going on there? It's not acceptable. In the elections, that message didn't seem, I'm not sure, did that message come out or not? Anyway, so if the people want to join the EU, they should tell the government, do what's necessary to join the EU. What's necessary to join the EU has been written down 1,000 and 10,000 times. Right now, the 9 points are necessary to get closer to the next step. You have to revoke the law on the transparency of foreign influence. We can't just improve it here or there. That's not happening. It has to disappear. You have to look again at this LGBTQ law because you're discriminating certain minorities in your country, and that's illegal in the European Union. And you have to talk, you have to stop talking badly about the EU, claiming that we are the enemies of Georgia when we're not. And that's still going on every day. Every day. Every time I open the news, I hear that I'm some kind of a dangerous agent. I came here as a friend and a partner, and you said that German government supports. That's taxpayers' money. That's German bus drivers, German nurses, German civil servants like me. We're all paying part of our tax for Georgia for 30 years, and a lot of privileged money. So how to get back on track, it's all been written down. Everyone knows, and certainly your government knows, because one of the things we do is we give a lot of scholarships too. And a lot of people in your government and your parliament have benefited from our scholarships. They are educated in law and other fields in Germany. They know what to do. Like the old commercial, just do it. But if you don't do it, then bye-bye Georgia. No more EU.
We don't want to see that. Thank you so much, Ambassador Fischer, for this very interesting interview, for being honest and being a true friend of Georgia for these many years. Thank you for the support that you are providing to Georgian people right now. We do appreciate your support sincerely. So I hope that our relations will continue, will get stronger, and Georgia will get back on the path to the EU integration.
I hope so too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On November 29, EU Ambassador to Georgia, Paweł Herczyński, made the first statement about the GD's decision to abort accession talks for, as the ambassador stated, long 4 years.
To the European Union, but precisely to the contrary. We have been always very clear what needs to be done. 9 steps were the guiding roadmap for Georgia in order to get closer to the European Union. In the last 1 year, not enough progress has been made on the 9 steps. On the contrary, on many of those 9 steps, we had backsliding. On top of it, many legislative initiatives have been taken that were not in line with European Union norms and principles. On top of it, anti-Western, anti-European propaganda has continued. Many conspiracy theories, a lot of disinformation has been spread by the representatives of the highest authority in Georgia, including the members of the government and members of the ruling party. All this together, unfortunately, brought us to the point in which, as European Union, we have stopped Georgia's EU accession process. This has happened already in June this year, so half a year ago. But again, we were waiting for the elections. We sincerely hoped that the elections would give a new impetus when it comes to EU-Georgia relationship. Instead of a positive impetus, unfortunately, there were serious irregularities, as stated by international observers. And now, the announcement yesterday that Georgia is stopping its EU accession efforts for the next 4 years, I think it is really, really regrettable.
And one brief business news for you. When it comes to real estate investments with a global perspective, Habeshi Group stands as a leading name in the industry situated in the heart of Georgia, a country celebrated for its dynamic economic growth and promising investment opportunities. Habeshi Group, under the visionary leadership of Mr. Hani Habeshi, has become the top choice for investors worldwide, offering exceptional opportunities and unmatched professionalism. The group continues to set benchmarks in the market. Today, we bring you an exclusive testimonial from Mr. Youssef Al-Saleh, distinguished international real estate consultant and investor. The special interview was recorded at the headquarters of real estate in Georgia, where Mr. Al-Saleh shares his personal experience with Habeshi Group. He highlights the unique investment opportunities in Georgia and sheds light on why Habeshi Group is the ultimate partner for anyone looking to succeed in real estate investments. This video is not just a testament to the group's achievements, but an invitation for investors to explore secure and rewarding opportunities in a thriving market. Now let us take you into this special feature, Habeshi Group, a global perspective.
This is my third landing in TBC for business, and hopefully it will not be the last. So why would businessmen come to Georgia? As you know, Georgia is virgin land of great opportunities. It's a great hub for business establishment and growth. Georgia is an inviting, growing market of endless possibilities. It is strategically situated between Asia and Europe on the old Silk Road. Georgia is famous for ease of trade and commerce, and it is the hub of global tourism. As everybody knows, the country is safe and very secure. My name is Youssef Al-Saleh. I'm a Jordanian Turkish citizen with over 35 years of executive experience in the GCC region. I'm a global senior advisor of strategy and business development. Currently, I'm a senior consultant for the world-leading oil and gas pillars. Previously, I was a senior advisor for geopolitics and defense industries. I'm a real estate investor with global property acquisitions in more than 5 countries in 4 regions. I'm sharing this testimonial and experience with either executives like myself who have the capital to invest and maximize, but do not have the time or the availability. I'm also sharing this testimonial with established businesses, companies, and organizations who aspire to go beyond and diversify their portfolio. Coming to Georgia, which I highly recommend, you will definitely need the best gateway. Therefore, Habeshi Holding Group is your best access point to Georgia. The Habeshi Holding Group profoundly operates in around 60 markets in 11 countries, capitalizing on 28 affiliations and business brands. They specialize in more than 7 business sectors and diversifies industries. Over the last few years, the Habeshi Holding Group successfully executed around 2,000 transactions with their elite clients. They managed this success story with a strong base of more than 850 elite professionals. Over 18 years of dedicated work, the Habeshi Holding Group, in partnership with the governments and authorities they operate in their regions, managed to lead the markets in 8 sectors. And these are real estate, construction and maintenance, tourism and hotel management, media production, telecommunications, education, learning and development, logistics and facility management, as well as sports investment. This profound success of the Habeshi Holding Group would not have reached this level of success without the vision and dedication of a charismatic businessman who traveled the world and demonstrated the heritage of 7,000 years of Egyptian civilization into Georgia, Mr. Hani Habeshi. With his resolve and aspirations, he made a dream come true, starting, growing, and leading the Habeshi Holding Group based on a robust strategy. Hani, as you know, is the chairman of the Georgian Egyptian Business Council. Also, he is the co-founder and partner of the Georgia Arabic African Business Union. Hani, my best friend, is master in demonstrating the global approach, thinking and aspiring globally while acting and executing locally. Hani and his champions, the employees of the holding group, are good in stakeholder management strategy implementation, making the best balance and win-win for the group, for the business, and for their clients. While doing this, they keep in mind the group's corporate social responsibility mission, where the group operates as a loyal citizen and active community member in the various countries. This was the secret behind the support of the governments for them in the various markets. And this makes doing business with them secure, reliable, and profitable. So, if you are aspiring for a trusted, experienced veteran in the world of business, Hani is your man. And if you are aspiring for a profitable business diversification with a global expertise, the Habeshi Holding Group is your home. Thank you.
13 business associations that are working in Georgia have condemned the Georgian government's decision to suspend EU accession talks until 2028, warning it risks squandering a key geopolitical opportunity. The associations criticize the move as undermining decades of work toward EU integration, isolating Georgia from Western partners and threatening its economy, democracy and security. They cautioned against the potential suspension of Georgia's visa-free regime and highlighted long-term losses in investment, trade and growth tied to EU membership. Calling EU integration a constitutional mandate and the will of the Georgian people, they urged the government to prioritize the country's European future. Till next Sunday, we will meet the same time on the same channel. Before that, of course, we'll keep you updated and posted on bm.g, so follow us.
The Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.